Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Just gonna wait a few seconds here. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. So I haven't seen or spoken to many of you in a really long time, and I feel really compelled by two particular stories, actually 3 stories that are happening right now, and I felt like I wanted to share some context and just some insights, and potentially even share information that maybe not a lot of people know about. I just felt compelled to have this conversation. So first I want to start with Stephon Clark. Many of you know he is a young Black man who was shot by the Sacramento police in the last week. He is a father of 2 beautiful children, a partner, a grandson, a son. Sorry. Today was his funeral, and I'm very proud of the Muslim American community out in Sacramento who is honoring him with the special, ritual prayers and janazah prayer that we do for Muslims. And many people don't know that Stephon Clark is a Black Muslim American. And it's just, I'm always outraged every time a Black woman or man in our country is killed at the hands of law enforcement. And I'm never surprised, but I'm always outraged. And just my blood just boils thinking about it. And, and this is just natural for any community when the person is part of your family, when you have a connection to them. And as a Muslim American, just being connected and understanding that not only am I connected to someone like Stephon Clark through his humanity and him being my fellow American, I'm also connected to him through faith. So it has been really hard just thinking about this beautiful young man losing his life and his beautiful children who are going to have to live without their father. And there are so many families in our country right now and children who are living without their fathers and mothers and siblings and children at the hands of the police. So I want you to make an extra prayer today for Stephon Clark and his family. I want you to raise up Alton Sterling and his family, 2 cops who were also not charged in the murder of Alton Sterling from, who was killed in Louisiana. I remember that story vividly when a young Yemeni Muslim American store owner, came out and said, look, the guy didn't have a gun and Alton was my customer and he was a great man. And here he was, lost his life at the hands of police. And one thing that I want to inject into this conversation, other than the deep loss that people are feeling at these murders, is that we can't have a conversation in this country about gun violence if we're not going to talk about police violence, if we're not going to talk about the very people who are supposed to be trained to protect and serve our communities, who are killing unarmed people, predominantly people of color, an overwhelming majority Black people. And if you're not going to bring that into the conversation, then you are not having a whole conversation. And in order to address any issue, you have to speak about these issues in a holistic manner. Or in fact, it is an empty conversation that is just, buzzing on the internet and will never really come to a solution. And the solution here, or the end result here, is very simple. We want people in our country to stop being killed, whether they're being killed at the hands of other fellow Americans with guns, at the hands of vigilantes like George Zimmerman types, or at the hands of police. And if we're not going to talk about the police, then we're not having a full conversation. And I don't want to be part of a gun violence conversation that does not include police departments and police officers around this country. So that's something that I want to see more people connecting the dots. And in particular, Black people, of course, have always been making these connections. And this is nothing new to the conversation. They have over and over again have tried to educate the masses about this idea that gun violence also includes police violence. So that's nothing new there. But for everyone else right now that's March for Our Lives, March for Our Lives, Black people in our country have been marching for their lives. They've been marching for their lives. We can say back for centuries, but at least within the past 60 years. So let's honor those who've been marching for their lives. Let's talk about gun violence and police violence as intersectional issues that directly impact people of color. And let's start having a whole conversation. Which brings me to another story that has been circulating on the internet that is very important for both Muslims and non-Muslims, and especially those who call themselves our allies and our accomplices. So there was a flyer that started out being distributed in Europe. And the flyer says, "Punish a Muslim Day, April 3rd, 2018, which is just in a few days. The flyer basically, and you can search it online, is basically a flyer that gives people incentives to actually hurt Muslims and gives you actually ideas about how to hurt Muslims on this, quote, "Punish a Muslim Day." We have absolutely no reason to believe that there is a particular something that's going to happen on April 3rd. Obviously, this flyer was meant to terrorize and instill fear in the hearts of Muslims in the West, both in Europe and here in North America and in the United States of America. And what I will say to people is that there's no reason to be, extra alarmed, because there have been many moments where Muslims have been punished within the last at least 16 years, and some can argue for longer. We have had an exponential rise in hate crimes against Muslims or those perceived to be Muslims. We have many cases of young Muslim women whose hijabs have been torn off, have been accosted or assaulted on college campuses or in the streets or at Starbucks or at coffee shops or at restaurants. And we've seen the videos, people in their cars being harassed. We also have seen the arsons of mosques across the country, most recently in a state like Washington, which was for the second time set on fire. We have seen mosques in places like Joplin that literally were burnt to the ground. We have seen men most recently charged for attempting to do a mass, basically blow up bombs in a compound with Somali Muslim refugees who were caught through work of law enforcement and other folks that provided some tips. So Punish a Muslim Day has been potentially, for some people, could be argued that we've been living in a period where people could be afraid. So what I'm saying here is that I don't want people to be extra alarmed. There's no reason to be extra panicked. I don't think that these people who are behind this flyer, I think they're cowards, in fact, and I think that they should be ashamed of themselves. And I hope that they are found, because what they're doing is absolutely outrageous. And what I will say is, you do what you do every day. When I go outside into the streets, I watch my back. I ensure that I do not leave my home by myself. And if I'm going to leave my home by myself, that I'm taking some sort of transportation with other people, or that I am, in a lift or something of that nature. For folks who are college students, if you take night classes, there's no reason for you to be walking to your car at night by yourself, especially as a young woman in hijab. Just be a little more cautious. And I think we've been asking people to just be more cautious. It's not about fear. It's just about being intelligent in this moment. It's about being strategic in this moment. If you are an ally to American Muslims, and you are an accomplice, be on the lookout. And I think one of the things that I have found is that in many situations where Muslims find themselves, or those perceived to be Muslims, like Sikh Americans, for example, that when something happens, the people around them have a responsibility to answer in that moment. And that does not mean to put yourself in any particular danger. But if you see a Muslim woman or a Muslim or someone who is perceived to be Muslim, like a Sikh person who's being, tormented or being accosted, or someone's yelling at them and saying racial things, even from afar, being able to draw attention to that moment and being able to say, please stop, get away from her, get away from him, really loud, and creating some sort of spectacle just to really make that person kind of stop what they're doing or move forward. 99% of the time, that particular type of intervention actually does help in many situations. And sometimes it doesn't. But doing nothing is not a choice in this moment. And I implore folks to be courageous in those moments and to step in and to intervene and be and be an active, don't be just a bystander, be an active bystander that actually ensures the safety of others around you. Right now, I don't have a lot of hope in our country, meaning, from the level of like official government, but I do have hope in my fellow Americans that we will look out for each other. So this Punish a Muslim Day, or whatever it's called, is supposed to happen on April 3rd. I, again, don't think anything's going to happen. I think, again, it's just the idea and the mission of it was just to really scare people and terrorize communities. So I hope that, people are just a little more aware, that your eyes are a little more open, and that you're ready to look out for your fellow, neighbors and classmates and, colleagues and others. No one in our country deserves to walk around the streets of their communities in fear. Nobody. I don't care who you are, what community you come from, what faith you follow. It's just unacceptable. And in my opinion, and I think other folks share my opinion here, and Diana just reminded me of this again, silence is violence. If you are in a vicinity where something is happening, where someone is being hurt, and you stand by or you turn a blind eye and walk away, for me personally, silence is violence. And you are complicit in the violence that is happening against our communities. When I think about Stephon Clark in the context of this Punish a Muslim Day, Stephon Clark was punished for being Black. The police officer may not have known he was Muslim at the moment, just like many Americans don't know that he's Muslim, but he was Black. And that was very clear that he was Black. And to be in a country where a young man is shot 20 times in his own backyard, who is unarmed, is absolutely unacceptable. And this is not the first and the second or the 10th or the 20th or the 40th or the 100th time that has happened just within the last year. So I just want people to know that, we have to stand in solidarity, and that when we come out, to march in the streets, whether we came out to march at the Women's March 2017 and 2018, whether you came out, in the thousands, in the tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands for March for Our Lives, we got to ask ourselves these questions about: when do we choose to come out? At what moments do we choose to come out? And what does that say about who we are? So right now, I know there are a lot of people that are engaging in actions around the country for Stephon Clark, but of course it's not at the same level that we have seen for Women's March or for March for Our Lives. And I hope that we start seeing the value of those who paved the way before us. When the Women's March happened, we didn't just show up on a national stage being like, we're Women's March and we're the women and we're going to do this. There were people before us that led us to that stage at the Women's March. There are shoulders of giants that we stand on, who have continued to do this work. And some of them, in fact, lost their lives doing the work that many of us are doing to uplift racial justice, including knowing that April 4th of 2018, which is only next week, is the 50th anniversary of the commemoration of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, in a hotel where he was actually giving an address to workers. And we have to understand that this work requires some risk, and that if you're going to these big marches and you're feeling comfortable, you're feeling joy being there, which is something that I feel when I'm organizing. When I'm with people that are like-minded, I do feel joy. So I'm not shaming people who feel happy and feel joyful to be in those spaces. But if it didn't require you to be a little uncomfortable, then it's not exactly the type of activism that we need in this moment. The type of activism that we're looking for in this moment, that communities of color are looking for from you and from everybody, is a type of activism that makes you feel uncomfortable. When I leave my home every day to organize, I come home with some discomfort in my heart. Sometimes it's due to something that I have to grapple with inside, something that I may not have thought about in an intensive way, maybe something that someone said to me that made me challenge my own views about something, or about a particular community, or about a policy, or about a moment, or about an event, or whatever it was. So if you are doing this work and you are showing up to spaces and choose to be in spaces that only make you feel comfortable, then you're just not doing this right. I'm imploring people to not only show up to these marches that are being organized and facilitated, but show up to the city council hearings. stand up and speak at community boards, stand up and go and be at these, you know, town hall meetings that are led by your elected officials. You know, when you hear about a young Black man or woman in your community who have been killed at the hands of police, show up in that community, show up for those families. So I'm just feeling overwhelmed with emotions. And for folks who are going to be at ICNA in Baltimore this weekend, please join me on Sunday with many Muslim American groups who are organizing a vigil and a rally in honor of Stephon Clark right outside of the convention center, Baltimore Convention Center, on Sunday at 12 p.m. I'll be there with Imam Mikhail Smith and other Muslim American leaders to really, you know, stand there to mourn together, to recommit ourselves to the fight for racial justice, to reminding ourselves as Muslim Americans, in particular those of us who are immigrants or children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants, that our community is 1/3 African American. So we are not allies to the Black Lives Matter movement. We are not allies to Black people. These are members of our Muslim family. So when we are out here standing up for Stephon Clark, we are standing up for every Muslim American sister and brother in our community and for their families. Oftentimes our Black Muslim family, by extension, their families are Christian and people of other faiths. So I implore our immigrant Muslim community to not say we need to bring the Black community together with the Muslim community, because your communities already has Black Muslim people. So we are not we should never be in a situation or saying something that makes the presumption that Black people and Muslims are two separate people. We have people in our community that are living with both those very important and beautiful identities, and we want to make sure that they know that we see them, that we are all part of one Muslim family. And in fact, it is because of Black Muslims that people like me can stand strong in this country, can be unapologetic about who we are, and that we pay homage to the African American Muslims in our community who allowed us and created the pathway for us to be Muslims in this country. So please keep Stephon Clark and his family in your prayers in whatever way that you pray, and that you not forget the many young Black men and women who have been killed at the hands of law enforcement and gun violence in their own communities. Let us not forget the many Muslims around the world who continue to be killed at the hands of the U.S. military, who are also using taxpayer-funded ammunition and guns against Muslims. So let's not forget those people, and let's also stay bold and resilient in light of these tactics and antics to try to terrorize our communities through this Punish a Muslim Day, which again, as I said, I believe are just a whole bunch of cowards. And there are many ways. Somebody posted a link about ways for you to protect yourself. I think we should ensure for all of our mosques and Islamic centers, if you have surveillance cameras, make sure that your tapes are working, that your cameras are working, that if there are people who do think that they can engage in acts of senseless violence against our communities, that they be caught and be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and that we will not stand for people hurting Muslims or those perceived to be Muslims, and that we also are not engaging in any type of selective outrage, that we are outraged when Muslims are assaulted or murdered or killed or terrorized, just as we are outraged when any community, any religious community is experiencing the same, and when Black people both inside and outside our community are experiencing that same type of terror or fear, or when undocumented people both inside and outside our community are feeling this type of terror. So sisters and brothers, I love and appreciate you all. And going on the words that I have been taught through this movement that I'm a part of in the racial justice movement, taught by Black women, the words of Assata Shakur. And she says, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our change. So please love and protect one another. Watch out for each other, because real sanctuary is not a policy that is directed by a local city council or a mayor or even the federal government. Sanctuary is about how we choose to show up in community for one another. It's about creating safe spaces that are led by the people of those neighborhoods and communities. So let us be sanctuary, because sanctuary is a mindset. It's not something that is necessarily tangible that you can touch, but it is a way that we operate in a community to ensure that everybody feels safe. So thank you so much, and love to all of you, love to the Stephon Clark family of the Sacramento community, to Alton Sterling and his family, and to all those in our communities that have lost their loved ones at the hands of the police or gun violence. Assalamu alaikum.